I wouldn't say that they're paranoid. I would say that they need to be risk sensitive.
There are threats. There are threats everywhere.
Number one fear amongst the super rich is not being super rich anymore.
People worry about losing it all. I have had women who have hundreds of millions of dollars who, to this day, worry about ending up on the street as a bag lady.
So, where is the cautious billionaire to start? Well, first off, physical protection. There is a whole world of high-end security systems throwing up barricades around the super rich.
Bulletproof cars, bulletproof windows in their homes. They'll have bodyguards. They'll have panic rooms in multiple residences. And all of this is because they are aware that as billionaires, they are big targets for organised crime.
They cannot just walk down Kensington High Street or through Knightsbridge, because they could be walking along with £500,000 plus. Their wives could be wearing £3, £4, £5 million worth of diamonds. So rather than take the risk, they now employ companies such as ours to make sure that they get places in perfect safety.
They're so far removed from simple pleasures that they're always thinking of their status, protecting their wealth. So the downside is stress, panic, paranoia.
This vehicle will take direct hits from up to a 7.62 sniper round, AK-47, fragmentation grenades, up to around 15 kilos of explosive at 25 metres.
The extent to which any member of the super rich is actually in danger doesn't actually matter what the reality is, it's the perception that matters.
I've worked for several people for whom the people around them have felt it necessary to meet me with armed guards and stand behind me, men with Kalashnikovs, while I wait for the client. And I've sat there and thought, you know, I'm a wedding planner. Your client is... there is no danger to this person whatsoever. You really don't have to stand and guard me like that.
One of the first things we do on any operation is to check a vehicle for explosives.
It's partly a status symbol. It's partly you can't possibly approach me.
Normally they'll be placed on the underside of the vehicle.
And it's partly because they genuinely think they are in perpetual danger.
And because the super rich know that the threats to them are sometimes real, the humble car safety kit contains a bit more than plasters and a tube of Savlon.
Standard body scanner. We also have packs within here that will stem blood flow due to gunshots.
Money creates all sorts of paranoia, backstabbing, envy.
In here we have arsenic detection kit.
I think the very, very wealthy are the ones we never see. I mean, we've seen the Kardashians on TV, we've seen the Abramoviches, but there are a lot of gated communities with bodyguards on the doors. We don't know what goes on behind those doors.
You do become cocooned. The wealthier you become, the bigger the cocoon you live in. And this is just, unfortunately, the trappings of wealth.
London is a honeypot to the uber-wealthy. At the last count, there were 105 billionaires in town.
Ultra-high net worths have a big issue with trust, because everyone is making money out of them, including me, because I run a business, giving them security products.
The global ghetto of great luxury which the very rich live in, it's a form of security.
Living under constant threat and smothered by a blanket of security is the unpleasant daily reality for many billionaires.
If you go around some of the really wealthy squares, like Eaton Square, that the residents basically pay full-time security firms to monitor 24 hours.
It's no longer enough to be chauffeured around in bulletproof cars. For many billionaires, the only way to keep their fears at a distance is by bolstering the brute force at their side.
One of the reasons the security is being beefed up is because the level of intruders is also changing. And there was a story in my neighborhood of an offender having been caught in the garden, and it turns out that he wasn't a burglar, he was a hitman.
A hitman in your hydrangeas would be something of a thorn in anyone's side, no matter the wealth. But for the billionaire, it's stark warning that he needs to get protected immediately. And right now, he needs to dig deep.
Well, if you're looking at a 10-man team, perhaps charging out £1,000 a day per person, and then technical equipment on top of that. An ultra-high net worth could be spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds.
But it's not all about in-your-face muscle. Often, protective firepower can come in less obvious forms.
I noticed the trend, certainly when I was working on the close protection side, that women working in this role were in higher demand. There is a trend now for a more discreet approach to security. Teams were wanting to employ women in order to help with, particularly with wives and children, and scenarios where they needed a more of a blendable approach.
And that more discreet close protection could see bodyguards blending in with roles as personal assistants and nannies.
The nannies, the bodyguards are all part of a seamless team that will work in an appropriate way, in a blendable way for the family even, and that's where the use of women has risen.
To ensure that they're getting the best from their protection, billionaires are not averse to employing extra layers of secret agents to keep watch over the security team.
You find yourself hiring people who become an entourage, and issues of trust can become awkward because people on your payroll, how do you know how much you can trust them?
You want to make sure that they're doing the right job. So it's not uncommon to bring in the surveillance team to watch the close protection team. Yeah, we quite happily go in there and take a whole load of footage, to out them as having not done their job properly, sleeping in cars, when they're meant to be awake all night outside of property.
Security staff watching security staff. Ultimately, there's often a small army surrounding the hyper-wealthy, and things can get a little bit too cozy for all present.
There are real dangers if you have a lot of money, and these people aren't just here for show. There's often many, many security guards. We worked on a property last year that had 42 security guards just to look after 4 people. It is a challenge, and it's a bit of a circus.
Coming up, billionaires install panic rooms to keep their loved ones safe at home.
Kidnap is a big concern for billionaires.
You have to live in this isolated, sterile world.
These are people living in their own micro-communities. They worry that we hate them, and a lot of people do.
They live in gilded palaces and panoramic penthouses. But their palaces are fortified and their penthouses are high security. For the hyper-wealthy, the everyday threat of abduction is real and made more real by historical events.
Billionaires will look at security, primarily at the safety of their family. Kidnap is a big concern for billionaires.
They worry a lot about, how safe is my family, as well as once your name is out there, what will be the impact knowing how wealthy they are. That responsibility becomes burdensome.
One of the most well-known and complex cases of kidnapping was of the heiress Patty Hearst. Kidnapped in 1973, $6 million, equivalent to over $33 million today, was paid for her return.
Better if I were home right now, and I'd like to get this over with so I can go home.
There was a family I worked with that had bodyguards. It was because there had been death threats.
The ultra-high net worth who's been kidnapped could very well be hurt or harmed in some way.
We've seen it already in the UK, hostile attacks on individuals, which has involved threats towards members of the family, if not taking hold of the family with a view to asking someone to get the safes open within the property.
I've had 2 families where there have been kidnappings, and that stayed with them forever.
There was one billionaire who was kidnapped in the Sudan. And it was very important for him and his family that he had K&R insurance, which is kidnap and ransom insurance. So they held him for 6 months, and eventually the transaction was actually made. So these terrorists were paid off. He was released. And in typical fashion for a billionaire, he was released on the Friday and returned behind his desk at work on the Monday to continue his job.
There was one occasion where the ransom amount that had been demanded was $10 million. And the client made the mistake and the error in the stress of the situation of stating £10 million, to which the kidnapper retorted, £10 million will do fine by us, which inevitably, that foreign exchange was probably about $15 million.
A simple and costly mistake. but a sum dwarfed by other ransom amounts known to have been paid to kidnappers, allegedly, of course. It's rumoured that the Kwok family from Hong Kong paid £67 million for their son Walter's safe return. And in 1996, a reputed £121 million was paid to secure the release of businessman Victor Lee. The threat of high-level attacks on the super-rich is feeding the demand for more extreme protective measures. Because they can, billionaires are now spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on panic rooms, bunkers, and safe core suites, accessed through secret passageways.
The object of a safe room is to get the client to create a barrier and a time delay between them and an attack.
This is one of our sort of straightforward basic panic rooms we've got here. This is a six-sided unit, so basically we have protection from all sides. When this thing's bolted as a cube, it's very substantial. A panic room is sort of the last resort in an envelope of security around somebody's premises. You'll have anything from CCTV to outside perimeter manned security as well in a lot of cases.
These are people living in their own kind of micro communities. They worry that we hate them, and a lot of people do.
We've seen a growing demand in the last 6 to 12 months. I think people are trusting some of these secure rooms now for some assets as well. I think they've got somewhere to put valuables they don't want to leave out.
But being billionaires, there are so many valuables to choose from, and careful prioritization is essential.
Is it their art collection? Is it their wine collection? Is it the wife? Is it the children? It seems obvious that most people are going to say, well, of course, my family comes first. But I have clients that, if they lost a certain art collection, it would be the end of them.
With multiple properties around the globe, billionaires regularly cross time zones and borders. So protecting your family and prized possessions becomes a huge challenge if you're constantly on the move.
The billionaire class is like a very rare migrating bird. They go from Miami Art Fair to New York, to the Caribbean in Easter, to the Hamptons in the summer, and they take with them their toys and their yachts.
Being on a yacht is the one place that is so safe. It's a very happy time, and it's very private.
They have the financial power to acquire any experience, any product, any person. And yet, you know, the deal was you can do all that, but you have to live in this isolated, sterile world.
Fear and paranoia constantly battle with any sense of well-being in many billionaires' minds. Even on their floating palaces, some billionaires suffer so much from perpetual distrust that they can never truly kick back and relax.
If you go down to Saint-Tropez in August, there's all these big boats and guys with women on their boats. They're 60 years old with a pot belly, and they know full well that the only reason the girls are attracted is because of their money.
But if freeloaders on deck pose a potential problem, a far bigger threat to the modern billionaire comes from pirates.
Today, the modern pirate is a very different animal to what we perhaps have grown up understanding. So when somebody builds a 100-metre super yacht, it's not always as fast and stealthy as other vessels that could perhaps get close and board them.
Although pirate attacks are rare in the Med and Caribbean, they do still happen, even here. In 2008, the £20 million yacht Tiara, moored off Corsica, was stormed by 4 masked men and its passengers robbed of £100,000 worth of valuables.
There is an app now that will tell you where anybody's yacht is moored at any time. And so the idea that you are in this kind of, in the Mediterranean all by yourself are over because anybody can find you on their little boats. So it's become a bit of a problem.
No man is an island, even one on his super yacht. And once again, a huge investment in personal protection must be catered for.
I think a super yacht could easily be attacked It comes down to what the security detail is for the client. Do they have men protecting them and available, and do they have devices that are able to tell them what's in the surrounding waters?
The billionaire's understandable obsession with safety has led to some ingenious futuristic gadgets which allow them to stay one step ahead of any threat, whether at sea or back on dry land.
Fast vein is a new technology that identifies humans from the veins inside their finger using a scanning device which shines near-infrared light through the top of the finger, and a camera underneath identifies the person in about a second. It has the ability for the client to save them carrying keys altogether. They just use this to open their doors. The technology requires blood in the veins, and in severing a digit, you will not have a scannable vein pattern that will operate. So cutting somebody's finger off will not work.
Coming up, when your financial advisor is stealing from you, and the threat of cyber attack.
The ultra-high net worth individuals really do need to consider what they say and who they say it to.
When you have that level of wealth, there will be individuals within the world that will be after you and try and extort you.
The billionaire lifestyle may seem like a stroll down easy street without a care in the world.
Wealth does drive people over the edge into paranoia.
But the huge amounts they spend on security suggest that the lives of billionaires are more stressful than they appear.
They have to keep their money under control, they have to protect it, and they're suspicious of being disliked and used and abused by other people.
The super-rich believe that they are often under threat, physically, emotionally, and psychologically.
Some people with ultra-high net worth can become oversensitive to it. We had clients that particularly would call us when they were out and about to say, somebody's following me.
Who's real, who isn't? Who can I trust? And probably very, very few.
You think everybody is just out for your money, and to a certain extent that is the case.
And I did have a client. He had mainly retreated from the world, lived on a farm, very much by himself, and when he would interact with people, he would always come back to me with some story about how they were taking advantage of him.
The ultra-high net worth individuals really do need to consider what they say and who they say it to.
One of the places that billionaires need to exercise extreme caution is in the murky world of finance.
Billionaires will look to preserve wealth in any way they can by spending more money on better advice. So they want advisors who can see when the market's about to change and that they should exit one strategy in order to enter another.
Sometimes ultra-high net worth people are afraid of some of the professional advisors that they encounter.
When you have that level of wealth, there will be individuals within the world that will be after you for one reason or another.
One of the most infamous predators on the super-rich was trusted professional advisor Bernie Madoff.
Members of this exclusive synagogue are reported to have lost as much as $2 billion in the Madoff scheme, with some even acting as recruiters.
I've lost everything. What am I going to do?
I lost everything.
Bernie Madoff was a investor, had a fund. He, went after people who liked money, who sort of thought that they were traveling in the same circles. They, the idea that if you knew somebody who could get you into Madoff was a really good thing, and that was a badge you could wear. As I'm one of those who managed to do that.
My clients lost several $100 million with Bernie Madoff.
He targeted those people and played on their need to belong to something and their need to give money and make more money. And a lot of them went down.
In New York's big money circles, no one wants to admit they got scammed.
Madoff's Ponzi scheme lost an astonishing $65 billion. But he's not the only scammer to have fallen from grace and favor.
This morning, sir.
American Alan Stanford also brought about financial ruin for his trusting clientele. With so many threats to their financial welfare out there, it's no surprise that some billionaires choose a low-profile existence.
There's two types of billionaire. Billionaires that are showy and are out there and that are listed in rich lists globally. And then there's the more discreet billionaire whose key driver will be the security of their family. They don't want people to know that they're worth billions.
However, there are times when even keeping your head down isn't enough to protect you.
Blackmail is a genuine risk to the ultra-high net worth community. I had a client who was approached and blackmailed by a friend that he'd known for a significant amount of years. They would go out, have dinner, and he would confide in him and tell him all about his latest business deals. He approached him and said that he wanted several £1,000,000, or he would release the confidential information to the opposing party about what he had said. And I think that had a huge impact on him. The greed was what changed his friend, and he took advantage of it.
I don't think money can be the root of all evil. I think that evilness will oftentimes, and badness will oftentimes get played out around money. You know, money has so many meanings to people. It's love, it's control, it's, you know, do you care about me enough? Do I have enough power? Am I the decision maker? There's so many things that get played out around money. Money is not just money, right? And so when you say it's the root of all evil, it's because all that other stuff gets wrapped into it. And so when anything happens, it's because of that money.
And that money only fuels the billionaire's paranoia. In fact, the circle of trust for many billionaires is limited to only the very closest friends and family.
My experience is that ultra-high net worth individuals trust a person or a couple of people who have known them for their whole lives, who knew them before they were who they've become in terms of money and all the rest of the assets that go with it, because they can really be themselves with that person. That works, but if that person should ever betray that in any way, shape, or form, that is a betrayal that is really near to impossible to get over.
And the result?
They sue each other up the kazoo.
Anyone new entering the billionaire's world must therefore be kept a very close eye on.
Anybody could be put under surveillance. They may put a spouse under surveillance. They may put the children under surveillance. Could be looking at the son or daughter's friends, or even people that are coming in to try and rip them off.
By putting just one person under surveillance for a period of 3 days, you're going to find a lot out about them. What time they leave for work, where they go for lunch, whether they pay for things in cash. The possibilities of what you can find out are endless.
When you're very wealthy, you have to choose your friends very carefully. Who's after who? Who's a real friend? Are people just after your money? Do they see the genuine person behind the wealth?
And the obsessive need to keep an eye on everyone never stops. Some billionaires monitor the other side of the world from their luxurious holidays.
Nemba Island, which is a private atoll off Zanzibar, our Wi-Fi system kept crashing. So we were trying to investigate what was happening because someone was using up all the bandwidth. We traced it to a single bander. While the guest was out, we went into a gentle investigation to see what was happening in there. Well, we found, something like Mission Impossible. They'd put together a technical stack because he had a house being built back in England, and he didn't trust the builders while he's away. And he was using full downstream streaming to manage the building project while he was on holiday.
And with access to the best technology that money can buy, every keystroke reveals hidden truths.
Obviously, if there's a precious daughter, the father's going to want to know everything he can about her new boyfriend. Of course, they're going to want to see some information on him. A lot of our investigations will be done through what we can find on the internet, through social media.
The question becomes, is this a person who's with me because they care about me or because it's my money?
But in the internet age, it's not only billionaires who are doing the watching. With their love of technology and nomadic lifestyle, billionaires themselves are prime targets for cybercrime.
Hostile surveillance is something that somebody does to you when they want to study you, to try and get to you. So ultra-high net worth clients will get studied. Most individuals and most information is available on the internet without even going near the target.
It's not enough to have a a guard, but you have to have people who are, you know, IT specialists that sit in your basement because no one can read these things or understand them. And then they need assistance because once in a while they have to go to the bathroom as well.
Cybercrime is rife. These cyber criminals coming out of Russia or China, they're treating it like a business. And I think that the high net worth community, they're low-hanging fruit, if you like.
In the UK alone, financial fraud through cybercrime is estimated at £27 billion a year.
There's lots of attacks that can come through the internet now. One particular that's current at the moment is called ghosting. A cybercriminal will get access to the high net worth individual's computer system, and they will monitor the email exchange between themselves and maybe their financial advisor until they can emulate either side.
Thousands and thousands are being spent in order to ensure that they are safe when they do their transactions from their phones to their computers, because the damage that can be done is quite extraordinary.
Protecting your physical wealth online is one major concern. But in the age of trolls and hacking, the internet threat is also about damage to your reputation.
Privacy is the absolute centre of importance to someone that's extremely rich.
So you have the billionaires who want privacy. Then underneath that, you've got the super rich who actually like showing off, and they upload pictures of the yacht they're staying on Instagram. And then you've got the wannabes who just like goggle at it, like me.
With so much information easily available, billionaires need specialized online protection.
The latest one now is social media consultants. So you need to be able to make sure that when your child posts a picture on Facebook, that there is someone in-house who can monitor the activity before it goes viral or you end up being on the news.
They worry about their affairs becoming public, and so therefore the impact of that on their children, the impact of that on their friendships, their old friendships, and what that all means. They worry about all of those things.
So they have the libel lawyers to protect themselves from anybody prying too much into their affairs. And they have the PR people who look after their image relentlessly, because image and reputation management, once you've made huge amounts of money, becomes the most important thing.
Coming up, be careful what you wish for, as super wealth can seriously damage your sense of well-being.
Wealth does drive people over the edge into paranoia.
The biggest concern amongst the super rich is loneliness. They're lonely in every way.
They're so bored, there's nothing else to look forward to.
It seems billionaires have the same fears as the rest of us, but on a bigger scale. And even once they've spent huge sums to shield themselves, they still can't relax.
Here's where they get isolated. They have so many people who service them, who go to the food stores, who dig their gardens, who do all of those things, that they get out of touch with what it takes to do any of those things.
It took me by surprise. The same qualities that propel billionaires to become masters of the universe also often make them susceptible to feelings of inadequacy.
What void are they feeding with this? What sense of worthlessness are they feeding by the accumulation of valuables?
And because these super-rich birds of a feather flock together, there's no one telling them the kind of home truths that friends usually pass on.
The super rich tend to hang out with the super rich, because while you and I might be talking about, you know, where we're going to go for lunch, they're talking about the difference between the new Gulfstream and the Learjet.
So it's quite hard to have so-called normal relationships when you become extraordinarily wealthy, because you assume, and probably not wrongly, that people are after only one thing.
The lack of normal relationships is why things unravel.
The biggest concern amongst the super rich is loneliness, because they're lonely in every way.
People can get very afraid and really retreat. They're afraid, ultimately, of being isolated.
They live in a rarefied world. They don't know who to trust. And so they have this little tight cocoon around them. So if you have a tight cocoon around you and you increase the pressure, where is that going to go?
There is one group of professionals that billionaires turn to when they need release. They're therapists.
There's a whole new world of therapy and counseling for the super rich.
A lot of these people are running massive businesses. They're CEOs of this and that. It's a stressful situation. You've got all kinds of issues.
For a billionaire, their therapist is often the most trusted person on the payroll.
So I work with multi-generational families who have billions, and I also work with newly created billionaires.
One has come in contact with people who are high net worth individuals, and often their ex-wives or their children. And what strikes me is that the biggest curses I've ever come across are either huge fame or huge power or huge wealth.
I would say a lot of my clients have retreated from life. And they're all clients who have a tremendous amount of financial wealth.
And when billionaires withdraw from life, it's not uncommon for them to be suffering from an addiction.
80% of the billionaire families that I've worked with had families who had addiction problems. I have two families I know where I've seen the kids go into recovery, and in the process of going into recovery, the parents have to, all of a sudden come to terms with their own alcohol difficulties.
There's a lot of evidence already that the children of the super rich are seeing unprecedented amounts of anxiety.
When anxiety meets temptation and limitless wealth, the next stop is usually rehab.
You're the rehab kid, and that seems to be almost okay because it wasn't your fault. You have a terrible addiction, and poor you, and therefore the fact that you didn't finish school is okay.
Part of recovering from an addiction, an addictive process, is enhancing your own self-esteem. Now, if you've never had any self-esteem in the first place because you've grown up in an environment that hasn't allowed you to develop that, then it makes it twice as difficult.
The root of the problem often lies in the billionaire kid's upbringing. Huge wealth from birth can be the great extinguisher of any fire in the belly to succeed.
Well, many of the children, it's not just what they're doing, it's also what they're seeing. They never saw their parents having to struggle to make it. They just see their parents literally drowning in money.
Quite often, the children of these high net worth individuals will have all these valuable trinkets and things, but because they haven't actually put any effort into getting them in the first place, they don't necessarily feel good about themselves.
They worry that their kids have become too entitled, whereas they, if it's a first to second generation, they worked really hard. The kids come into it at a point where the money is oftentimes made, and so they're not seeing the work that went into getting it.
What you'll get is somebody who sets up a company. They'll hand it over to their children, who will run the company very successfully, but then the next generation will mess it up.
The parents worry that they're never going to attach doing something for getting something.
And if you're the child of a billionaire, you need to succeed spectacularly. Doing okay is simply not good enough.
You're not ambitious, you're not good looking, you're not going to be a supermodel, you're not going to blog about fashion, you're not going to create a fashion chain, no matter how much money is given to you. And these are the kids, I think, who will have the hardest time.
It's a big burden on kids to tell them that there's going to be a tremendous amount of wealth and you need to learn to manage it. So how does that young person find their own dreams?
Some of the super rich are so worried that inheriting great wealth will be a burden that they shut their children out of their wills completely.
They worry about, am I going to be leaving them too much money, too little money? How do I make sure they can take care of themselves? How do I make sure that they're not reliant on this money? How do I prepare them for the complexities that they're going to be facing?
Super rich individuals like ex-New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, Virgin boss Richard Branson, and American business magnate Warren Buffett have all pledged to give away the majority of their wealth rather than leave it to their children. Some rich kids themselves also feel that wealth is too great a burden and choose to walk away from it.
I have had more experiences with young women walking away from their money than young men. And they walk away from it because they want to see that they can make it on their own.
For most of us, the fear of having too much money is something we'll never have the luxury of worrying about. But for those that do, there's an easy solution. Just give it away.
I have clients that have said, if my ultra-high net worth status has pushed me into a position where I'm going to be such a high risk, I might as well give it all away.
Billionaires in the US, I believe it was started by Gates, started a foundation which basically suggests that they will give away half of all their wealth.
One's defined by not so much money one has, but how much one gives away. I think this is a growing trend. Certainly in the UK, we've seen a lot of rise in philanthropy.
You have the 5% Club, for example, in South Africa, which, along the same lines, is that every year the ultra-wealthy will give away 5% of all their earnings. I think what we're seeing is a giving culture that has been driven out of the US, starting to have huge effects or huge waves globally.
And those American billionaire givers mean business. Bill and Melinda Gates have given away $28 billion so far, just over a third of their fortune.
In a world of good causes, how do you decide what to spend your money on?
Well, we really look at what are the top disease killers and what's the biggest burden of disease around the globe.
Warren Buffett has given away $25 billion so far. And George Soros has handed over $10 billion of his own to good causes.
What I have in mind is several times as large as the International Science Foundation.
The average billionaire will leave $100 million US in philanthropic gifting.
But even in charitable mode, billionaires need to be cautious.
I have seen it in two kinds of instances. One where a younger generation member of a family, a billionaire family, feels like the local philanthropic community targets them because they know that the family has money, and so they keep going after them for places on boards, etc. And that begins to feel like I'm being targeted. So they don't even want to name their philanthropy after themselves because it leaves them too much open to public view.
There is one final fear that most billionaires face. Who will remember them, and how will they be remembered?
I think the idea that they are men of means but are not men of substance is a recurring terror in The Billionaire. It's a very underwhelming epitaph if the only thing you have on your tombstone is your net wealth.
They've actually bought everything. I mean, there's only so big a super yacht that you can have. There's only so many Ferraris or Maseratis or Rolls Royces or houses or palaces or ski chalets that you can have. So you reach saturation point. And for some, not all, what then kicks in is a desire for reputation and legacy.
We view the super rich from afar and perhaps wish we had their lifestyle. But the ultimate luxury of feeling safe and unafraid is something even vast wealth cannot buy.
It might seem like, oh, you know, I want to be rich, I want to be famous, that's going to solve all my problems. And I think just a small percentage of the world's population that could handle it. And to the rest, it probably is more of a curse.
I think from my perspective, if you're a well-grounded person, it is an easy thing to be. Billionaires have the money to make choices, and I think that's what the rest of us aspire to achieve.
I would never want to be a billionaire. I think it adds so much complexity to your life.
I have clients sometimes who just say, you know I shouldn't feel this way, but this is a burden.